The Chesapeake was an extremely habitable area for tobacco to grow, which led many profit-hungry peoples to plant more, even before they started growing other crops. The mass production of this crop led to the decrease of prices, but Chesapeake tobacco growers still continued to grow more to cope with them getting less and less money. The more tobacco the Chesapeake grew, the more manual labor they needed. Indian families grew too slowly to help with the needs of labor, and many died from disease. Many new diseases came from English immigrants. Many of these people were men in their late teens or early 20s, and they soon perished, likely from disease. Diseases such as malaria, dysentery, and typhoid cut 10 years off the average life expectancy of settlers. These diseases killed many of the settlers during this time. Half of the time, settlers did not live past 20 years old. The other half did not live to be 50 or 40 if they were women. It was also very common for women to die during childbirth.
Society was also overwhelmingly male. Because male servants were more useful in the tobacco fields, they were the greatest proportion of immigrants. In fact, they outnumbered women 5 to 1. The women who did come over were mostly indentured servants, and if they were to marry, which they often did because they were in great demand, they had to wait until their term of service was up. This meant delayed marriage, which meant fewer children, which further reduced the number of females.
As said in the video, there were a very large amount of males compared to females. This meant that women got married multiple times during their short lifetimes. Many women's husbands died from disease, so they kept marrying other men so that they would have somewhere to live, and also because many men were fighting over the women. Due to many people dying in the Americas during this time, something had to be implemented so that more settlers would come over. So, the headright system was put in, which offered 5 acres of land to each person that brought somebody over to the Americas. This led to the creation of many large estates populated by indentured servants, who were temporary slaves that had to do what their masters told them to do, as slaves did. Since the price was so high, many people could not afford to go to America. A wealthy person would provide money for that person to sail to America, as well as food, clothes, and a place to live, in exchange for that person working for them. Indentured servants during this time would acquire land after working for 4 to 5 years. All indentured servants were very hopeful to gain their land after working, but many died before doing so. Due to the many indentured servants that came over from Europe to work, there were very few families living in the Americas at the time.
Being servants. These terms of servitude were written into a contract, and the contract was enforced by the American courts. At the end of their servitude, they were often promised land to settle. Some indentured servants had learned a trade during their servitude and already had job skills when their contract ended. The history of indentured servants goes all the way back to 1607 during the settlement of Jamestown, the first successful British colony. During that time, there was a lot of work to be done in the New World. Homes and businesses needed to be built, and farms needed to be tended to. Many laborers were needed, but very few could afford the passage. The cost was usually half their annual wage, so the Virginia Company would pay for indentured servants to come to the New World, and then they would work off the cost of the passage over a few years.
Indentured servants were used for a while until Bacon's Rebellion, when they switched to slavery. Bacon's Rebellion was an armed revolt of white indentured servants in which they burned down towns.